All right, let's dive into America's Cold War. And trust me, it's a story that's way bigger, way more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting than you probably learned in school. We're talking about power, paradox, and a hidden battlefield that shaped the entire world. So let me ask you something. When you hear the phrase Cold War, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Seriously, picture it. I'm willing to bet it's something like this, right? Soviet tanks rolling up to a line in Germany, facing off against NATO forces. You're probably thinking of the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain, that whole tense standoff in Europe. And look, you're not wrong, but that's really just the opening act. The real battlefield, the main event that truly shaped the world we live in right now, it wasn't there, no. It was fought in a totally different arena, across dozens and dozens of brand new nations just shaking off the chains of colonialism. So this is it, the real Cold War battlefield. Think about it. After World War II, empires are crumbling, and this huge wave of decolonization completely redraws the map of the world. All these new countries are popping up, and they're vulnerable. Their economies are fragile. For the superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, each one of these new nations became a critical piece on a global chessboard, and every move was high stakes. And for these new nations, it was like they were being pitched two completely different paths for their future. You had the US coming in, offering the American dream, democratic capitalism, free markets, join our club, the Western Bloc. And then you had the Soviet offer, authoritarian communism, a state-controlled economy, join our team, the Eastern Bloc. And this wasn't just about ideology, not at all. These places had vital natural resources, strategic locations, so getting their loyalty, that was everything. Okay, so this intense global competition forced the US to create what you could basically call an anti-communist playbook, a set of moves they'd use again and again. And nowhere did they run this playbook more aggressively than right in their own backyard, Latin America. A really clear, almost predictable pattern started to emerge, all justified by one goal: stop communism at all costs. And this pattern, it was so consistent, it was almost like a script. Step one, a country decides, hey, maybe we should control our own natural resources, their own oil, their own land. Step two, a big US company gets nervous, and suddenly American corporate or strategic interests feel threatened. Step three, that threat gets immediately relabeled as a communist threat. And boom, step four, that's all the justification needed for covert action. Maybe the CIA gets involved to put a more friendly, pro-US government in charge. It got to the point where literally any left-leaning idea was just automatically stamped communist. Let's look at Guatemala in 1954, a perfect and tragic example. They democratically elect a president, Jacobo Arbenz. He decides to nationalize some land that wasn't even being used, land that just happened to be owned by the giant American corporation, the United Fruit Company. While the company wasn't happy, the CIA got involved, backed a coup, and out went the democracy, in came a military dictatorship. A really devastating precedent was set right then and there. And then things got even more intense with Cuba. After Fidel Castro's revolution started cozying up to Moscow, the US decided to go all in with an actual invasion, the Bay of Pigs, in '61. And it was an absolute disaster. Not only did it fail spectacularly to get rid of Castro, it basically shoved him right into a full-blown alliance with the Soviet Union. And that, just 1 year later, led directly to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the single closest we have ever come to all-out nuclear Armageddon. Okay, now fast forward to Chile. Here you have Salvador Allende, a democratically elected socialist. I mean, he's not a military threat to anyone. He's an ideological one. So for 3 years, the US quietly works behind the scenes to wreck his economy and destabilize his government. The message couldn't be clearer. If we don't like your ideology, we are willing to tear down your democracy to stop it. But here's where it gets really complicated. Because all this hard power stuff, the coups, the covert ops, that was only one side of the story. At the exact same time, the US was running a completely different strategy, a soft power approach. And this created this huge, fascinating paradox right at the core of American foreign policy. And you can see this paradox in action right here. On one side, you've got President Kennedy's Alliance for Progress. We're talking billions of dollars in aid for schools, for healthcare, all designed to lift people out of the poverty that might make communism look appealing. A great idea, right?
But then, on the other side, if one of those countries turned around and democratically elected a leader the US saw as ideologically hostile, the default move was to send in the spooks and destabilize the government. It's like building a house with one hand while setting it on fire with the other.
Now, this push and pull between America's stated ideals and its strategic interests, that wasn't just a Latin American thing. Oh no, the same playbook got a new chapter when it was applied across the Middle East and Asia, this time to protect another absolutely critical resource, oil. And the flashpoints were everywhere. You've got Iran in 1953, where the CIA's Operation Ajax kicks out a popular prime minister just because he wanted to nationalize the country's oil. Then there's Egypt, where its leader, Nasser, got incredibly savvy at playing the US and the Soviets off each other to get the best deal. And then you have somewhere like Angola, where a local civil war just explodes into this brutal global proxy battle, with both superpowers pouring in money and weapons to back their chosen side. So you have to ask, why? Why this massive, globe-spanning commitment? Why get so deeply involved in a place like Southeast Asia? Well, it all came down to one simple but incredibly powerful idea: the domino theory. This was President Eisenhower's big fear. He believed that if you let just one country in a region fall to communism, its neighbors would topple one after the other, just like dominoes. And believing in that theory, it came with a staggering price tag. We're talking over $1 billion in aid poured into South Vietnam alone. All of it was a preventative measure, an attempt to prop them up so they could resist communism and be the one domino that refused to fall.
Now, it's important to remember, American foreign policy wasn't all conflict and covert ops. Sometimes it was an incredible force for stability. I mean, look at the Camp David Accords in 1978. You have President Jimmy Carter sitting down with the leaders of Egypt and Israel and brokering a historic peace deal. That's a huge moment, a powerful example of what American diplomacy could achieve.
And of course, hanging over everything, every proxy war, every coup, every peace treaty, was the giant shadow of the nuclear arms race. The whole terrifying logic was based on a doctrine with the perfect acronym, MAD, for mutually assured destruction. The idea was simple and horrifying. If you launch your nukes at us, we'll launch our nukes at you, and we'll both be wiped off the face of the earth. It's one of history's great chilling ironies. The very weapons that could obliterate humanity were also the only thing preventing the US and the Soviet Union from ever going to war directly. So after decades of this relentless worldwide struggle, people back home started to really question the costs. Not just the financial cost, but the moral cost of wielding so much power. And one of the most powerful warnings, maybe the most powerful, didn't come from some protester or critic. No, it came from the very heart of the American establishment. And who was it? It was Dwight D. Eisenhower. Yeah, a five-star general, a celebrated WWI hero, a Republican president, pretty much the last person on earth you would expect to deliver this kind of warning. So in his farewell address to the nation in 1961, Eisenhower drops this bombshell. He warns America to guard against the military-industrial complex. What he meant was, he was afraid that this huge, permanent war machine we'd built to fight the Cold War, all the defense contractors, the lobbyists, the military brass, could become so powerful that it would start calling the shots in Washington, twisting policy for its own benefit, and becoming a threat to our own democracy from the inside. And that right there, that brings us back to the central nagging contradiction of the entire Cold War. The United States, in its mission to stop communism, frequently used tactics, like toppling democratically elected governments, that went completely against the very democratic values it said it was fighting to protect. So, that leaves us with a really tough question to chew on when you think about everything. The coups, the proxy wars, and then Eisenhower's chilling warning about the dangers at home. Where did the real threat to American democracy actually come from? Was it the Soviet Union? Or was it what the US became, and the things it was willing to do in order to fight the Soviet Union? It's a question we're still grappling with, and the consequences of those choices are still playing out all around us.